making as much money as possible, being as efficient with your time as possible, and then using that extra time to go out and do something new or creative or challenging outside of your work. Again, to reiterate, like my best ideas, my true passions that I enjoy as much as I love my work, I find the greatest ideas come from when I had a really successful day.
What you don't know is costing you commas and zeros. Welcome to the Owner's Profit Playbook. I'm Pat Mancuso. Most entrepreneurs think their biggest challenge is growing revenue, but the real problem is the profit leaks hiding inside their business. On this show, we break down the strategies, structures, and financial blind spots that separate struggling operators from truly profitable businesses. Because building a business is one thing, but building a business that creates wealth, that's the real playbook.
So welcome to the Owner's Profit Playbook. My name is Pat Mancuso. Most business owners don't realize what's costing them commas and zeros. On this show, we uncover the profit leaks and the blind spots holding your business back. Today's conversation is a little different. Most business owners think growth comes from better execution, but what the real advantage comes from is access. What you don't know, what you know, and when you know it. And what if having or not having that access is costing you opportunities you don't ever see? So today we're going to talk about that. Before we jump in though, a quick thought. Most business owners assume they don't qualify for the research and development tax credit. But if your team is solving problems, improving processes, customizing work for clients, there's a strong chance that you might. There's still a limited opportunity to claim R&D tax credits for 22 through 24 based upon the passage of BBB. That deadline, however, is July 5th, 2026. And once July 5th, 2026 comes along, that opportunity is gone. And even beyond that, businesses qualify for tax credits for 25 and moving forward. Take a quick check at www.rdquickcheck.com to find out if you are qualified for that tax credit. So I want to welcome to our show, Dylan. Welcome.
Hey, Pat, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, we're excited to have you here. And the thing that I'm excited the most about is you have a very diverse, what I would consider diverse business background as a multiple business owner in the kind of the diversity of where you've come from. So let's get started with, tell us about your journey and kind of when you first became an entrepreneur and the succession, the progression, and where you're at right now.
Yeah, and I appreciate the quick intro. I have a podcast and I love meeting new people, and I found that the most interesting people in history and currently are people who have diverse, unique, interesting hobbies, and they kind of blend them all together. And so I've tried to apply that to my life where I can, and I've been fortunate to, have amazing friends and mentors and colleagues. And so to kind of answer your question, I studied media and communications in college. I wanted to have as big of an impact as possible on the planet. And I saw, sort of this media tech space was really changing quickly. It was scalable. You could reach a lot of people. And so that's what I studied in college. In college, I studied abroad in Florence, Italy, and it was a great experience. While I was there, I was a very broke college kid and I wanted to travel as much as I possibly could. So the owner of a travel company reached out to me and he said, hey, if you want to travel with my company, sign up here. And I was like, well, how about instead I do some consulting work for your marketing and your social media in exchange for being able to, travel on your trips for free. Completely just bullshitting. I didn't know what consulting was, but he said yes. And I was able to travel, for free in exchange for kind of helping him with his media and his market at the time. And I just kind of kind of planted a seed in my head. I'm like, oh man, this can open up some doors. So I graduated from college and I ended up immediately going back to Italy and working for this company. And the boss, the owner at the time, was a really nice guy. We ended up becoming really good friends. And by working very closely with him, I got to kind of peer behind the scenes of what it was like to run a business and how to hire people and how to grow it and how to scale it, how to do marketing, how to do sales, how to do the logistics. And I was fortunate enough to, help him grow the company and kind of see, what worked, what didn't. And after about 2 years of that, it was beautiful experience, traveled all over. But I was ready to kind of move on and apply these skills that I learned into a new industry. So, moved to California. I got a job working as a television producer in San Diego. So I was working on a business, tech, finance, real estate TV show. Same thing. I was able to befriend the CEO, really smart, ambitious, successful young guy. And basically was like, I'm going to work, work my ass off day in, day out to learn as much as I possibly can from him. And eventually, after about 2 years, I did the same thing. So I produced somewhere in the world of 1,000 different TV shows, different episodes of this show. It was crazy. At any given time, every week, we were in pre-production for 30 episodes, production for 30 episodes, and post-production for 30 episodes. So we were churning out 30 episodes a week. And same thing, it taught me about, the finance side of the media world. It taught me about production, scaling, growing, building out teams, putting people in the right space. And then at that point, I was, mentored by these two entrepreneurs, realized I wanted to be my own boss, and set out and started up my own media channel called, around kind of like an emerging climate tech sustainability world. And at the time, that was very much a growing topic in the world. And it's changed, through kind of social habits and conversation topics and politics in the world. But at the time, I just noticed it was an up and coming kind of industry that was growing. Built that media company, sold it in 2025. Through that, I was able to speak at conferences and network and meet awesome people, start a podcast, and took on a 6-month contract with a government institution agency. Realized I didn't like that 9 to 5 lifestyle. So I went back and started a newer consulting firm kind of in this international policy space. And that's what I'm doing now.
Wow. So it's, funny. So I'm a part of a mastermind group with Roland Frazier, and we have this philosophy of consulting for equity. And when you said and then I added consulting for travel, there's a new one, consulting for travel. That's kind of fun. And so, obviously in your journey, you've had some opportunities. I'll use the word get access to individuals. And so I think that's a great strategy, by the way. And so were there any things in that you maybe consciously did, or like if you were talking to me and I said, okay, Dylan, I want to get access to so-and-so, like what would I do? Where would I start?
Yeah, so that's one of the most important things I think there is, especially as, a consultant where you're trying to build connections and connect with your ideal client. I quickly realized that, sales and leads don't come naturally. And, even if you're spending all day cold messaging or texting or asking for introductions, it doesn't work. We're all getting inundated by millions of, points of communication that we tune out most of them. And I realized very quickly that, day one of running my own business with 0 clients and emailing companies to work with was not the best use of my time. So I was very strategic of how can I kind of flip this sort of power? How can I get people to come to me or at least respect me enough to answer?
Right.
And that's where I started my podcast. Honestly, it was one of the best things that I ever did. And I basically realized there's just a tiny shift in how you're messaging people. If you just reach out to someone and say, hey, do you want to hire me? Or do you want to buy my product? Do you want to, use my services? You're just going to delete that email or block the number, right? Like, no, we all get that a million times a day. I started my podcast with 0 listeners. Who cares? But all of a sudden I started reaching out to these companies, and I would say, I'm the host of this podcast. We feature the biggest, best, most successful people on the planet. And we decided we'd want to feature you as one of our guests.
I love it.
And all of a sudden, most CEOs, they want, some sort of publicity, and you're feeding their ego a little bit and you're providing them value. And so, not everyone would say yes, but it definitely drastically increased my open rate, drastically increased my engagement. And then what would happen was I'd have these people on my podcast and they respected me because they saw that I was doing, I was building something, I had something already made versus, if it was just this cold email and I'm trying to sell something, they have that barrier up. And so
Right.
we'd have a conversation just like this, 30, 40 minutes, fun, interesting, you're hyping them up and you build a relationship with them. And then the podcast ends and now you've had a deep, moment with your ideal clients, and they're much more inclined to hire you, to work with you, to support you. And just from episode 1 up until episode 200 that I just did, all happens almost every single time. I can share literally the last episode, last 2, 3 episodes I did. It opened up an amazing, crazy opportunity that never would have happened in a million years had I not had this person on my podcast, had a good conversation with them. So it's very, one little switch of this sort of power dynamic of me not being like, I'm an annoying sales guy trying to get you. It's more, how can I provide this value? How can I support someone else with these very minimal resources I have at this time? But it opens up doors. And then that just continues. That goes up through, events. You can offer an event company, hey, I've got this successful podcast. I'll promote your event in a commercial if you give me a speaking spot.
Yeah.
Normally an event sponsorship is 10, 15, $100,000, but I'll give you a trade of, my sponsorship for your sponsorship. Now all of a sudden you're up on stage talking to 500 of your ideal clients and you've got this thought leadership opportunity. And, then it just grows and grows from there. And that's kind of how it's come into place. And it's a little bit of like chicken and the egg, you're kind of faking it till you make it, but then an opportunity presents itself, you prepare yourself, you learn, you ask, you do your best you can, you learn from that experience, and then you stack it on top of your previous skill sets.
I love it. Well, and I would be remiss if I didn't give Rise 25 and Jeremy a shout out, because that's how you're on our show, is that outreach. And so I'm curious, like, okay, so Jeremy did the outreach. Like, what was the reason that you felt that this was a good opportunity for you, other than what you just said right now?
So it's interesting because I have my podcast and I have my media channel, and we get so many PR requests every single day to feature someone else on my podcast or on, on our website, our news site. And most, again, 99% of them go to spam. Sometimes we'll say, hey, pay to play, or you can sponsor in exchange. And that's what I loved about what you did, is you reached out and you invited me to be a guest on your podcast. So I appreciate, and I respect you doing the same thing in return. And I saw that, and same thing, like I'm always looking for new opportunities to share what I'm working on. I'm looking for, to get in front of new clients. So you provided me an audience, a platform, and, now we have a relationship. We're having a good conversation together. And it makes me more inclined, once this conversation wraps, hey, how can I help you? How can I support you, introduce you to, a partner, a client, or investor, or whatever that may look like. So yeah,
it's a great philosophy. Yeah, I mean, it's a great philosophy, and it just, it was on recording just before you, and at the end we stopped and we talked, and of course, they invited me to their podcast, which I loved. It wasn't an expectation, but yeah, it's such a great way to build, and yeah, it's also an easy way, and sometimes owners don't see how, maybe they have a landscape company. And Jeremy and I talk about this all the time, the philosophy of go interview other great landscaping companies and, or vendor companies that, it's just such a huge opportunity. So let me ask you this. I think in the research that we did, you created something called the intelligence report. Do I have that right?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, my old previous media company, as I mentioned, was in the sustainability climate tech space. So I did exactly as we kind of mentioned. We built out a news site. We had the podcast, social media channel, newsletter. And I honestly was ready to kind of move away from that industry a little bit. It's changed a lot with politics,
Sure.
with technology, with AI. And I just saw this industry kind of slowing down a little bit compared to when I got in it. And I had the opportunity to sell. So I did. But through, as I mentioned, those speaking opportunities, I was able to, accept this 6-month contract at this government entity. It kind of sparked this new interest, this new experience, in more of how to really have impact on a massive, massive level. And originally, my previous company was like, hey, let's educate as many people as we possibly can through media, through social media, through podcasts. Now I'm kind of flipping it more to let's work at the highest levels of influential people to, influence policy. Um, and so the intelligence report is basically completely neutral geopolitical business finance news. So I come from a news background. I personally hate being on social media and I hate the news because it's so polarizing and it's such bullshit 99% of the time, part of my language.
Yeah.
Or, wherever you fall on your political beliefs, you're allowed to do, whatever that is. But any channel you're going to, they're pushing an agenda. They want to keep you afraid. They want you to come back. They want you to share it with your friends because that makes them more money. So
Absolutely.
I wanted to start a media channel that basically wasn't just purely driven for clicks. I'll probably make a lot less money doing that, but I can at least sleep at night, feeling good about myself that we're trying to share just what's actually happening in the world from a neutral perspective. And hopefully people can listen to that or watch it and, make their own conclusions versus just being spoon fed a talking point from
Yeah.
whatever news channel is your preferred.
So you're connecting with high net worth individuals, policymakers, organizations, and in the scope of business, right? So our listeners are business owners, small to medium size, big companies, high net worth individuals. And our goal is always to identify opportunities for them to close profit leaks, to add money to their top line, bottom line. So, what are you seeing in these conversations with the folks that we just mentioned? What are you seeing that maybe a lot of business owners wouldn't see?
So this is my perspective for,
By
and
the way, it's okay. We're not politically correct on here, Dylan.
yeah, no, I'm
Just
thinking
so you
more.
know.
Yeah. So I would say there's kind of this, maybe this is obvious, maybe it isn't, a widening gap of kind of like wealth inequality.
Mhm.
And we don't have to go into that. But for me personally, as a business owner and, the owner of a consulting firm, I'm kind of, following that standard 80/20. I'm really focusing my energy on those big, big clients. And so what I'm noticing is, there's a lot of people who are willing to pay a lot of money for whatever your expertise is. So what I did when I kind of left, my government kind of role that I did was basically stack all my skill sets, using AI with support and saying, okay, if I want to target the 1% who have all the money to pay me, a 10 or 50 grand a month retainer, like what could I actually provide them with value and help them with? And so that's what I kind of use to build my business around. Um, and again, every business is different. So that isn't necessarily what might work for someone, but that's what worked for me is, I want to stack these skill sets and charge as much as I possibly can. Then on the flip side, I want to be as efficient with my time as possible. We were talking before this, also a kickboxing coach. I like to kind of balance this like suit and tie life, shaking hands, high level meetings with like going out and just yelling at people and punching things. And I realized if I'm working with, 20 different clients and I'm doing everything and I have a couple assistants and I'm working 80 hours a week, I can't do this other thing that I also enjoy and love and
Right.
find creativity in that then helps that. So I basically figured, I used ChatGPT and Claude. And as I'm planning all of this, it's basically like keeping in mind how can I make as much money as possible? And then, with the services that we've come to the conclusion we wanted to offer, and then now that we're offering these services and we have paying clients, how can we streamline our systems, as much as we can? And that was one good thing. I learned my role when I worked in this agency was an operations role.
Hmm.
Taught me a lot about streamlining processes, building out things. And so that was a big part of it too, is okay, how do we, instead of, just as a random example, instead of emailing 20, potential clients a day, how do we tap into and stack a couple different AIs, and I click a button and it does it for me? And so
Yeah.
that's been a big part of what we've been working on, is not just saving money, but also saving time and trying to track that. And so, for example, I'll just give one. It's like we knew who our clientele was. We wanted to use LinkedIn because that's where they all were, to reach out to them. LinkedIn says you can message 40 people a day before you start getting kind of like spammy and you get flagged.
Yeah. LinkedIn jail.
Exactly. So we figured out, we found a couple different systems that we stacked on top of each other, and then it automates that LinkedIn outreach. So now we're, instead of, me or my assistant or someone else individually finding people, messaging 40 people a day, and spending, 6, 7 hours, whatever that might be, it's now a click of a button and two or three, $20 a month subscription softwares. And to the business owners out there, it's a little bit overwhelming, I think, and I consider myself pretty tech savvy, of just how many different AIs are coming out nonstop. So I've kind of figured out like little window of like 4 or 5 that I kind of use and feel comfortable with, get some systems in place, and then always kind of keep my ear to, what the next one might be. But also being smart about not just jumping from one trend, one new thing to the next, to
Yeah.
the next.
Yeah.
It's that operations side where it's like, all right, let's build out something. Let's make sure it's working. Okay, it works. Now that's done. Okay, let's find another thing we can fix. Okay, well, this new thing just dropped, and we apply that to this other system that we already have. Yes. Okay, great. Let's do it. If not, no, let's leave it. So it's finding that balance of using it, but not being overwhelmed by it as well. And I think that comes with identifying problems, finding the right solutions, and then building out those systems versus just, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to sign up for this. I got to do this. And then next thing you're paying absurd amounts of money for all these different monthly subscriptions.
Yeah, it's the entrepreneurial curse, right? We see the shiny new bling, and oh, I know what I can do with that. We're all guilty of it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you're right. I think it's by the minute, right? Somebody's got the newest thing, they got the update, they got this. Oh, wait, this is coming. And I follow Evan Carmichael, and I was watching one of the videos when I was on the treadmill yesterday, in fact, and he was talking about this exact topic. And one of the things I took away from that, because you're talking about a profit leak, which you just brought up as a profit leak. And what I took away is you have to pick something and stay with it, and then keep your eye on what's going on. And I think that the other thing that I tag on to there is that there are a lot of business owners, a lot of them, who are paying no attention to AI. And that's a mistake. That's a huge mistake. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. So let me ask you this: in your travels and your journeys, what do you in conversations consulting, what are business owners disconnected from right now that's actually happening?
I think there's a huge and continuously growing trend of kind of making the CEOs essentially the face of the company. That really, I feel like emerged. I mean, it's always been around. Obviously, CEOs have sort of been these celebrities, but
Right.
it's becoming more and more accessible, and the trends on social media are a lot more talking faces to cameras to provide value to a very, very specific micro audience. And I think that'll continue to grow. I talked to some.
Expand on that a little bit.
So basically, it's weird because you and I, like, we feel comfortable talking. We're putting our faces out there, and it's a little bit weird, uncomfortable at first. And most people don't want to do that, I'd say, from my experience. Like, they're like, I just want to be a business guy. I want to run this business.
Right, right.
But I've found, and it depends on obviously the size and scale, but the major CEOs are doing interviews on Joe Rogan, and they, going on podcast appearances and public speaking. But even down to smaller and medium-sized companies, we've got phones in our pockets. You can buy a microphone on Amazon. You can create content and have AI edit it for $20 a month. And you don't have to, and this is where I still get self-conscious to this day. I'm like, what if I put out a video and 100 people watch it? And I'm like, well, you know what? That's 100 people that I'm in front of that never would have seen me before. And maybe one of those people found some value in this. And maybe that one person wants to hire me. And all of a sudden I have a new $100,000 contract under my belt. 99% of those people scrolled right on by and probably never thought about me again. But if you continuously do that over a month, a year, those 100 views a day or 1,000 views a day add up. And on top of that, again, it's putting your face out there. It's positioning yourself as a thought leader. So even if, you're only getting in front of 20 people or 10 people or 50 people, if 5 of those people are, the top CEOs that you want to work with, and they see your face and they're like, okay, this guy, this person's well-spoken, they're knowledgeable, they know what they're talking about, they're providing some value. That, in my opinion, is much more valuable than someone who is afraid to put themselves out there, because that potential client or customer never see them and never know they exist. So that's a big challenge I'm seeing, but a very easy fix is, put yourself out there. And it's going to be awkward. It's going to be weird at first, but we have so much accessibility to do that now, and so much access to our specific clients that you're wasting, valuable opportunities by not doing it. So get over that awkwardness, just go for it. And you're going to experience so many people reaching out to you. And I'll give a quick example. So when my biggest client right now, I met him last year at a conference. I spoke at the conference. He liked what I was talking about. We met at the conference. We became friends. Super nice guy. That was kind of the end of it. I, never really stayed in touch. We followed each other on LinkedIn. Then I took that 6-month contracting job where I wasn't allowed to do any self-promotion just based on the work I was doing. And I could just tell I was missing out on opportunities. So when that contract ended, I was like, I'm going to just honestly, zero shame, post once a day on LinkedIn. And the reason I did that is because another friend of mine was doing that. And I was like, Ellen, I'm seeing you all over LinkedIn. Like, you must be super busy and successful with all the work you're doing. She's like, honestly, like, I'm busy, but I just decided I'm going to put myself out there a little bit more. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I will too. Started posting once a day, used, old pictures of me at events, and used Chat GPT and Claude for, ideas of content. And then that person who I met a year ago at this conference saw me posting consistently on LinkedIn, reached out and said, hey, it looks like you're doing some really cool stuff. Like, let's catch up. And I'm curious to hear what you're working on. And then, 1 month after me leaving that role and starting my business, I have that new client. And that would have never happened if I just didn't kind of get over that awkwardness of me being too humble to put myself out there. And so that's my advice, is a real life experience of how putting a little bit of content out there, sharing your knowledge, led directly to revenue coming into my business. For free, or for a Chat GPT subscription.
There's a few things, and I was, as you were talking, I might have seemed a little bit distracted, but first, the connections, right? That's just such a big deal. And you talked about this didn't turn into this at the front end of it. It's not about the numbers, it's about the quality. but you were in San Diego when I think you talked and you told me that you moved from San Diego, and I interviewed Sean Welch. It hasn't published yet, but Sean owned a restaurant in San Diego, and his story was amazing in that he was basically going out of business. And all he did was, you were talking about picking up the phone, and all he did was pick up the phone and start recording. And it literally saved his business, where now he's turned it into a media empire. And so it just, when you were saying that, it struck me like, yeah, it's just so easy. And yet sometimes people struggle with it so much, right? It's just, so I'm glad that you shared that, because you don't need a big budget, right? And some of the biggest opportunities come from the connections. And now I remembered where we were going in that, or where I was going in that. You said, maybe I only had five, but what many people don't understand is, if you get one, they've got a network of people, and they're going to be more you know what I'm saying, more willing to refer that. And it's just, that goes back to the connections. So what let me ask you this. How often is the timing the difference between getting early or missing it completely? Talk to me about that.
I think that's why I've always been interested in this media world. That's why I started, and wanted to go to college for it, is because the trends of media they change so quickly, but they're so important to our lives. Dating back to literally the dawn of humanity, there was, someone talking on a rock about, the latest news and sharing stories. And that has continued just through different means of technology, from the printing press to newspapers to radio to television to movies to social media to the internet. So there is no late time, in my opinion. It's more just jumping in whenever you decide to, and then changing and going with the ebbs and flows of what's trending in this media landscape. And even in, social media, I was doing social media consulting for that travel company, and that was 12, 13, maybe, I don't know, I'm going to age myself, but longer than I'd like to admit. But that was right when there was sort of this changing trend of, like, oh, social media is just used to post pictures of yourself and your friends,
Right.
to, oh, like, and that's what was really smart about this travel company I worked for. They saw this opportunity. They said, we can tap into the people that come on our trips. And if we give them cool pictures of them traveling, and they post that, and their friends see that, then their friends are going to want to come on our trip too. And it was just sort of this, social media didn't really exist yet I mean, it did but it wasn't like we were just going to use it for our own self promotion. And then that continued into when I was working as a television producer. We were filming a TV show that aired on cable at 8 a.m. And I'm like, hey guys, just because this has worked previously, a lot of people are moving to streaming.
Mhm.
Netflix is, growing. People are getting their news on their phones. We should really, think about more of a digital play. And the owner at the time, he was like, no, this works. What do you mean? Like, people are always going to tune into to this TV show at 8 a.m. on CBS. And I'm like, I don't know if they are, man. And then that's why I left that company and moved more into the digital space. And it's only going to continue to change. So I think as long as you jump in and start and do what you feel comfortable with, but also kind of paying attention to trends and things that are happening, you never know when, something goes viral and all of a sudden your 50 views turn into 1 million views. And, as you mentioned, your restaurant friend, like, that can turn you into a media celebrity on its own and open up new revenue streams beyond just this
Yeah.
restaurant. Now you're getting, partnerships and sponsorships on your social media pages, all because you decided to turn on your phone and say, hey, my restaurant isn't doing great. Like, come support a local
Yeah.
business to hear you
Yeah.
out today. So
Yeah. And
something to do.
restaurants are just a great example of how they struggle so much. And that strategy was so simple, and yet a lot of businesses experience the same things. What do you think people are doing wrong when they try to network?
Oh man, I would say this is my experience, and I was just on this networking cruise ship thing, which was really cool last weekend. I find the people who ask how they can help you first to be the people that I want to work with more because in any networking experience, and I think, going to networking events and meeting people in person is so important and more honestly, more valuable than actually, let me phrase this correctly because I don't want this to sound really aged in like 5 years. I think it's important to be active on social media, but I think it's also extremely important to be meeting people in person. And when you make those relationships in person, even if you live on other sides of the world, you guys can stay active and up to date with each other. And if you're doing that at scale, and meeting a lot of people and you're making connections, you're building those relationships, and then that people can see what you're doing when you're posting online. That's exactly what happened at this conference where I got the biggest client I have.
Sure.
And again, I think going back to your question is every person that you're meeting when you're networking is really interesting and really cool. And they're going to share the coolest things they're doing and they're going to hype themselves up to sound awesome. And when I was on this networking thing that I was just at, like it was almost intimidating because I'd like to consider myself relatively successful just to, positive manifest it. But then when you're around 1,000 other people who are all doing amazing things, you can kind of start to doubt yourself. And so I realized when everybody's really successful and smart and amazing, kind of nobody is.
Right,
Then,
right.
for the 10th time, if you're meeting another investor, founder who's done this, and this, you kind of lose, it loses its value. And so experiencing this in real time, the people that I genuinely wanted to support and connect asked me what I was doing, asked me how they could help me, hyped me up when they were, in a group of people introducing other people.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I think those are key things. Is not just, we all have our own goals and we're all trying to get new business and grow and get investors and whatnot. But if you can lead with just kind of going back to our original conversation about providing that value with the podcast,
Right.
providing that, hey, how can I help you before I just think of myself? All of the people that I've continued to work with to this day, I think have started with that. And I've looked back on myself and been like, man, I kept probably tried to sell myself a little too hard to this person that would be great, but I lost that opportunity. So yeah, just asking how you can support other people first before just asking for them to buy your product or invest in your company.
Yeah. I love the idea of a network cruise. What a niche, right? Network cruise, gambling cruise, dating cruise. I mean, we could start a cruise company and it was just specialty niches and we could fill up every ship. I love it. I love it. I love it.
It was
Um, Go
no,
ahead.
no. Speaking of like podcasts and opportunities, it's a really funny story. A woman I met at a conference who I saw after I kind of came back online, she won an award for her work. I texted her, I was like, hey, I saw on, Instagram, you won that award. Congrats. We started conversing. And then she was like, oh, I have a great person for your podcast. She introduced me to the CEO of this company called Summit. I had him on my podcast, and then afterwards he was like, "Hey, do you want to come on this cruise ship for free?" So
I
it's all
love
these
it.
little,
Yeah,
little that
connections.
I connect that open up new opportunities. So it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, you said something earlier and it struck in that there's so many opportunities that we don't necessarily see. And you mentioned the connection, right? And I actually think we're moving I think there's a portion of our population that's moving in a different direction. It's like they are so connected to this, but they're also disconnected from reality in the world. And there's a group of people who are like, okay, this is enough. I got to put it down and I got to start talking to human beings because otherwise, we may have some issues. Like, human beings have to talk to human beings. So I love that you brought that point up. So let's shift a little bit, and let's make this real. So I always say that we call this the 2-minute drill in the owner's profit playbook. And so I'm going to give you some statements or some questions, and I just quick first thing, and we may drill down, but give me a real example where your access created real opportunity specifically. I mean, you just shared one, but do you have another one?
Yeah, I was at a conference. I saw a speaker. I loved what he was talking about. I went up to him after and said, "I love what you're doing. You're really inspirational. I want to work with you, however that may be, whether I'm cleaning your freaking floors." And he was a super nice guy.
Yeah.
We kind of became friends. He ended up inviting me to another big kind of conference in another country, paid for all my flights, my Airbnb, and a group of people that was drastically elevated in status and finances than myself was at the time.
Hmm.
And being at that network, that event, it opened up new doors. And that kind of led to me deciding to sell my company and opening up my role with this sort of institutional work I did. And just from that conversation at this first conference, befriending this guy, getting to go to this other conference, because I was at this exclusive conference, it already gave me, kind of this, like validation that I should be there, which then
Right.
opened up more doors, which then I learned a lot from different experiences to lead me to opening up my company today.
I love it. 3 steps you would give somebody after they meet someone for the first time.
I would say exchange information, but ask them what their preferred communication platform is.
Great question.
Some
Yeah.
people I've met, they want to do email. Some people I've met, they want to do Instagram. Some people are LinkedIn. And like, I personally prefer Instagram, even though it might not be the most sort of professional. And it's just because when you're meeting someone for 5 minutes, you don't get the whole picture. And if you just connect with them via email, you kind of forget who they are as a person and their face. So that just helps me like sort of stay up to date with things that they're working on.
Okay.
But another thing I've learned, which was a game changer, is if you meet someone really interesting that you want to work with, pull up your Calendly and literally have them book a time with you then and there. Because when you're at conferences, you're meeting people, you meet a lot of people, even if you're exchanging business cards.
Right.
In the moment, you're really excited. You collect a business card, you go home, you have a stack of them, you rarely follow up. And if you do, you kind of forget who the person is. So if you really have a good connection with someone, be like, let's book a call for next week right now. And if worst case scenario, we reschedule. That has opened up so many opportunities because I've noticed when you meet people in person, especially at conferences or networking events, there's so much hype in the moment, but you meet so many people that the follow-up rarely ever leads to real actual business.
That's so true. One thing you would tell business owners to stop doing.
I would say this is my personal preference. This might not equate to everybody, but take some time to put away your computer. Don't burn yourself out. I burned myself out many times. I've realized that, and there's studies that go into this, how much time spent working you're actually productive versus how much time you're honestly, after a certain point, you're just wasting. So
Right.
I'm personally very conscious of that. And if I start to feel myself getting tired or just unmotivated, I'm willing to be like, okay, I did enough for today. And I try to go out and get some exercise. And I found that, putting your computer away, going to the gym, doing yoga, going for a walk, it resets you. You're pulling yourself out of your just hyper focused mindset.
Right.
It ends up opening more ideas than if you just continue to try to type away at a spreadsheet or answer more emails. So don't burn yourself out. Go get some fresh air, move your body. And I think that actually helps you in the long run if you find that balance.
100% agree. One of my mentors is Gary Keller, and he wrote a great book called The One Thing, and that book has impacted my life in terms of what you're just talking about, in balance and counterbalance and priorities, and when you're most productive. And so I love that. I love that I brought that up. This has been amazing. And so what I'd love to do is, first, if somebody wants to reach out to you, talk with you, connect with you, what's the best place and way for them to do that?
I would say I'm really active on LinkedIn. If that's your kind of go-to, message me. I'm always responding to my messages there. Instagram, if you're more of like a visual person, although that's more of just like my travels and fun stuff, but it's just
Sure.
it's good to see all aspects of people's lives if you're into that. And then, if you want to just get a good source of neutral current events, check out intelligencereport.org. And we've got our podcast, The Intelligence Report, and would love to have you on, because I feel like I did a lot of talking and I barely got to ask you, what your thoughts are and how I can support you. So would love to have you on my podcast as well.
I appreciate that, and absolutely, and I'd love people to always gain knowledge wherever they get it. So we certainly appreciate that. So one final thought before we close out the show to business owners who'd be listening, what would you tell them?
Find that balance of making as much money as possible. I know this might sound very simple, but like reiterating it, making as much money as possible, being as efficient with your time as possible, and then using that extra time to go out and do something new or creative or challenging outside of your work. Again, to reiterate, like my best ideas, my true passions that I enjoy, as much as I love my work, I find the greatest ideas come from when I had a really successful day. I put my computer down and I went for a run and all the creative juices were flowing. So I hope that, pay your bills, pay your staff, grow your company, streamline it, and then, find whatever else makes you happy beyond just, your emails and your marketing and your computer and your business. And I promise you that will open up new doors and opportunities that you never expected would happen in a million years.
I love it. I love it. Well, Dylan, thank you so much. You've contributed so much today, and you did more of the talking, but that's why you're on the show. It's my show, but you're the guest. So I appreciate you and all the information that you shared with our guests. For those that have listening, we so appreciate your support, sharing, subscribing, and really just listening, because that's why we keep doing what we're doing. And we bring some amazing guests and like Dylan. And so we just appreciate y'all, and we wish you the best, and wish you to have a great day. And we'll see you the next time on the Owner's Profit Playbook. Thanks, Dylan.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take care.
If you're serious about building a more profitable business, make sure you subscribe to the Owner's Profit Playbook so you never miss an episode. And if you know another business owner who could benefit from this conversation, share it with them. To learn more about how we help business owners uncover hidden opportunities and strengthen their financial strategy, visit mancusocg.com. And remember, what you don't know is costing you commas and zeros.